The Hartley family operated on a simple principle. The louder you complained about the farm, the more progressive you were. And I, Emma Hartley, had never complained. I loved that farm. My grandfather, Samuel Hartley, was a man of few words but infinite patience. He'd inherited 240 acres of seemingly worthless Oklahoma prairie land from his father in 1968. Rocky soil, sparse grass, barely suitable for cattle. While other families struck it rich with oil wells and wind farms, our land just sat there, stubborn and unproductive. Grandpa Sam worked that land anyway. He ran a small cattle operation that barely broke even most years. My grandmother Dorothy kept chickens and a vegetable garden. They lived in a modest farmhouse that needed constant repairs, drove trucks that were older than I was, and never complained about what they didn't have. By the time I was born, the farm was considered the family embarrassment. My father, David, had escaped to Dallas where he worked in commercial real estate. My uncle Richard had become a lawyer in Oklahoma City. My Aunt Patricia married a petroleum engineer and lived in Houston. They'd all left the land behind and built sophisticated urban lives. The family consensus was that Grandpa Sam should sell the farm, move to assisted living, and distribute the cash so everyone could actually benefit from it. After all, 240 acres in rural Oklahoma, assessed at around $1,200 per acre, meant the property was worth maybe $288,000. Split 4 ways among Grandpa's children and eventually to us grandchildren, it wasn't going to change anyone's life. My sister Olivia certainly had opinions about it. She was the successful one. Married to a tech executive, 2 perfect children, a house in Austin worth $1.2 million. She called the farm Grandpa's money pit and suggested at every family gathering that he was being selfish by not selling. Then there was my cousin Brandon, Uncle Richard's son. He was a financial advisor who drove a Mercedes and talked constantly about portfolio diversification and asset liquidation. He'd actually calculated how much each grandchild would get if the farm sold. About $24,000 each after taxes and estate fees. Better than nothing, he'd say. My cousin Jessica, Aunt Patricia's daughter, had married into oil money. She lived in a River Oaks mansion and thought the farm was charmingly rustic in the way people describe things they'd never actually want to own. And then there was me, 29 years old, unmarried, working as a veterinary technician making $43,000 a year, living in a small house in Stillwater, driving a 10-year-old Ford Ranger, the granddaughter who never left Oklahoma, the one who still wore boots covered in mud and didn't mind the smell of cattle. At family gatherings, they'd gather in the kitchen while I'd be outside with Grandpa, checking on the livestock, fixing fence posts, doing the actual work. They'd discuss their portfolios and renovations and exotic vacations. When someone remembered to ask about my work, it was always with barely concealed pity. Still working with animals? That's sweet. Doesn't pay much, though, does it? I learned early that being invisible was easier than being constantly reminded that I wasn't impressive enough. But Grandpa Sam saw me differently. While everyone else wrote off the farm as a lost cause, Grandpa noticed the quiet granddaughter who actually cared about the land. I'd visit every weekend, driving the hour from Stillwater. We'd ride the fence line, check on the cattle, maintain the equipment that was held together with rust and prayers. We didn't talk much. Grandpa wasn't a talker, but in the silence, he taught me everything. How to read the land, how to watch for weather, how to know when a cow was about to calve just by the way she separated from the herd. When I was in college, struggling with tuition, Grandpa quietly helped. Not loans, gifts. Education matters, he'd say in his slow Oklahoma drawl, pressing a check into my hand. But knowing the land matters more. When I graduated with my veterinary technician degree, he helped me with the down payment on my small house. Stay close to home, he said. Some things are worth more than money. As Grandpa got older, I was the one who started really helping with the farm. First just weekend visits, then handling the cattle sales, then managing the property taxes and insurance. By 2017, I was essentially running the entire operation while working full-time at the veterinary clinic. Olivia visited maybe twice a year, always complaining about the dust and the smell and the lack of decent coffee within 20 miles. Brandon and Jessica came for Christmas and Thanksgiving. took photos by the old barn for their Instagram feeds with captions about roots and heritage, then left before dinner was over. They weren't there when the well pump failed in January. They weren't there when we lost 3 calves to a late freeze. They weren't there for the endless work of keeping 240 acres from falling apart completely. I was there every time. In early 2019, Grandpa asked me to meet him at his attorney's office in town. I thought maybe he needed help understanding some paperwork about the farm's liability insurance. Instead, I walked into a meeting that would change everything. "Emma," Grandpa said, his weathered hand covering mine across the conference table. "I'm 82 years old. Time to make sure this land goes to the right person. It should go to Dad, Uncle Richard, Aunt Patricia, and Aunt Carol," I said immediately. "That's only fair." "Fair?" Grandpa interrupted, his blue eyes sharp despite his age. "Let me tell you about fair. Your father wants to sell this land the second I'm gone so he can buy a bigger house in Dallas. Your uncle wants to develop it into suburban lots. Your aunt thinks it's worthless and wants to auction it off quick." He squeezed my hand harder. "You're the only one who sees what this land really is. Not an asset to liquidate. A legacy to protect." His attorney, a serious woman named Margaret Chen, who'd handled Grandpa's legal matters for 30 years, slid documents across the table. "I'm transferring the farm to you through an irrevocable trust," Grandpa said. "Executes immediately, not when I die. Now. You'll own it. You'll protect it. You'll keep it in the family the right way." I stared at the papers, my heart racing. "Grandpa, the family will never forgive this." "The family," he said with a slight smile, "doesn't need to know. Not yet. The trust transfers ownership privately. County records will show the land belongs to the Hartley Family Land Trust, with you as trustee and beneficiary. Let them keep assuming. Let them keep making their plans. But, no buts," he said firmly. "I've watched you for years, Emma. You show up. You work hard. You love this land. Your sister sees dollar signs. Your cousins see a real estate opportunity. You see what it is. Home." Margaret explained the legal structure. An irrevocable trust meant exactly that. Once executed, it couldn't be undone, contested, or modified. The property would transfer immediately, with Grandpa retaining a life estate in the farmhouse, but everything else moving completely into my control. We signed the papers in March 2019. The 240-acre farm deed transferred. The Hartley Family Land Trust was established with me as sole trustee and beneficiary. Everything was filed with the Payne County Recorder's Office, completely legal and public if anyone bothered to check. But there was something else, something Grandpa hadn't told anyone. "There's one more thing," Grandpa said after the trust papers were signed. Margaret pulled out another folder, this one thicker. "In 1972, when mineral rights were being bought up across Oklahoma, a company approached me about the subsurface rights to this land. I leaned forward, confused. Everyone was selling mineral rights back then," Grandpa continued, "getting a few $1,000s for rights to whatever might be underground. Oil, gas, minerals. Most folks around here sold their rights and never thought about it again." "But you didn't sell?" I asked. "I sold them," he said, "but only for 50 years. With a clause that said if any production occurred, I'd get 25% royalties. And after 50 years, all rights revert back to the landowner." My brain was racing to do the math. "Grandpa, it's been 47 years. That means, in 3 years in 2022, all subsurface mineral rights revert back to whoever owns this land." He smiled. "Which, as of today, is you." "But there's no production here," I said. "There never has been. No oil, no gas, nothing." Margaret pulled out a geological survey report dated 2 weeks earlier. "There wasn't. But new horizontal drilling technology has changed what's accessible. This land sits on the edge of the Stack Formation. Stone, Tulsa, Atoka, Cherokee, Kansas. One of the richest oil and gas plays in Oklahoma." She slid the report across the table. I stared at estimates, projections, subsurface mapping. "Companies are leasing land all around your grandfather's property. They just haven't approached him because they assumed he'd already sold the mineral rights decades ago. How much are we talking about? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Based on current production from neighboring properties and estimated reserves under your land, Margaret said carefully. If you lease the mineral rights when they revert to you in 2022, you could receive a signing bonus of anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 per acre. That's $3.6 million to $6 million just for the lease. Royalties from actual production could generate $80,000 to $150,000 per month for decades. I couldn't breathe. But there's a catch, Grandpa said. The family can't know. Not yet. If they find out about the mineral rights now, they'll fight the trust. They'll drag us through court for years. They'll claim I was incompetent or you manipulated me. So what do? I asked. You wait, he said. You keep running the farm. You let them think it's worthless. In 2022, when the rights revert, you control everything. By then, the trust will be 3 years old, ironclad, beyond challenge. Margaret added, in the meantime, I'll handle all communications with mineral rights companies. If anyone approaches about leasing, I'll tell them the rights aren't available until 2022, and the current owner isn't interested in early negotiations. Grandpa made me promise not to tell anyone. Watch how they treat you, he said. Watch how they act when they think you're getting a worthless farm nobody wants. That will show you who they really are. So I watched. And what I saw confirmed everything Grandpa suspected. For the next 3 years, I lived 2 completely different lives. Publicly, I was Emma Hartley, struggling vet tech with a small house and old truck. The family member everyone felt sorry for. The one who'd never really made anything of herself. Privately, I owned 240 acres that would soon be worth millions. Land that would generate more monthly income than most people earned in a year. I could have told someone. I could have prepared them. Instead, I kept working at the clinic because I loved the animals. I kept my small house because it was enough. I kept my old truck because it ran fine. And I kept showing up at the farm every weekend, doing the work nobody else wanted to do. I didn't just maintain the property, I improved it. I upgraded the fencing. I improved the cattle operation to actually turn a small profit. I rehabbed the old barn. I planted native grasses to prevent erosion. I did everything Grandpa would have wanted. Everything that would make the land more valuable when the time came. And I learned. I studied mineral rights law, oil and gas leases, royalty agreements. I took online courses in petroleum land management. I became an expert in something none of my sophisticated urban family members understood. The quiet, patient work of building real generational wealth. By 2022, I was ready. The farm looked better than it had in decades. The cattle operation was profitable. The land was healthy. And on March 15, 2022, the mineral rights officially reverted to the Hartley Family Land Trust. Margaret had already fielded inquiries from 3 different energy companies. We reviewed offers for 2 months. In May 2022, I signed a mineral rights lease with Continental Resources for $22,000 per acre. The signing bonus was $5.28 million. Royalties were negotiated at 22% of gross production. The first well went into production in August 2022. Monthly royalty checks started arriving in September. $127,000 the first month. $143,000 the second. By December, as more wells came online, monthly royalties were averaging $168,000. But to my family, I was still just poor Emma, wasting her life on a worthless farm. Olivia would show me photos of her kitchen renovation. $95,000, all financed through debt. You really should think about selling that farm, she'd say sympathetically. Get yourself something nicer than that little house you're in. Brandon would lecture me about investment strategies. Even with your limited income, you could build a portfolio. Let me help you. I'd smile and nod and say nothing. The breaking point came at Grandpa's 85th birthday party in June 2023. The whole family gathered at a rented event space in Oklahoma City. Grandpa sat at the head table, looking frailer than I'd seen him, but still sharp-eyed and aware. I'd spent the morning with him, driving him to the party, making sure he was comfortable, ensuring he had his medications. Olivia swept in late with an elaborate gift basket and a photographer to capture the moment. Brandon gave a toast about family legacy and honoring our patriarch. Jessica posted 23 photos to Instagram before appetizers arrived. During dinner, I overheard a conversation that made my blood freeze. Uncle Richard was talking quietly to my father and Aunt Patricia at the next table. "Dad's getting older," Uncle Richard said. "We need to start planning the transition. The farm needs to be sold." "Agreed," Dad said. "We should probably meet, just the four of us, and figure out how to divide things. The land's worth maybe $300,000 now," Aunt Patricia calculated. "Split 4 ways, $75,000 each. We could each give our kids about $25,000. "We should probably bring in Brandon," Uncle Richard said. "He could help us find a buyer, handle the sale professionally." They were planning Grandpa's estate at his birthday party while he sat 30 feet away, and I wasn't mentioned once. Not as someone who'd been running the farm for years. Not as someone who might have an opinion. I was invisible. I excused myself and called Margaret from the parking lot. "They're going to try to sell the farm," I told her. "Soon. I can feel it." "Are you ready for the revelation?" Margaret asked. "No," I admitted. "But it doesn't matter. This was always going to happen. What do you want me to do?" "Be ready," I said. "When they make their move, I'm going to need you there with all the documentation." 6 weeks after Grandpa's birthday, I got a text in the family group chat. "Family meeting, Sunday, August 13th, 3 p.m. at Richard's office in OKC. All adults must attend. Important discussion about the farm and Dad's future care." My stomach dropped. This was it. I texted Margaret immediately. "It's happening. Can you be there?" She replied, "I'll be in the parking garage. Text me when you need me." Sunday arrived hot and cloudless. I drove to Oklahoma City, passing through neighborhoods I could afford to live in, but chose not to. Uncle Richard's law office was in a gleaming downtown building, all glass and steel and expensive views. Inside, the family had assembled. Dad, Uncle Richard, Aunt Patricia, Aunt Carol, Olivia and her husband, Brandon, Jessica and her husband. Even some of the younger cousins who'd recently turned 18. Notably absent, Grandpa Sam. "Dad's at home resting," Uncle Richard said dismissively. "This discussion doesn't concern him. We're handling this for his benefit." We gathered in the conference room. Uncle Richard had printed agendas. Brandon had brought a laptop with a PowerPoint presentation. A PowerPoint for selling my grandfather's farm without his knowledge. "Thank you all for coming," Uncle Richard began, standing at the head of the table like he was chairing a board meeting. "We're here to discuss the farm and make some important decisions about its future. Dad's 85 years old," Dad added. "He can't maintain 240 acres anymore. He's being stubborn about this, but we need to do what's best for him." Brandon opened his laptop. "I've done a comprehensive analysis." He clicked to a slide showing an aerial photo of the farm with property boundaries and estimated values. Current market value for comparable rural land in Payne County, approximately $100 to $300 per acre. Total property value, $312,000. After sale costs and taxes, we're looking at about $280,000 to distribute. He'd done his homework. I felt sick. "Here's what I'm proposing," Brandon continued, clicking to the next slide. "We petition for conservatorship over Dad on the grounds that he's no longer capable of managing his affairs. Once we have legal authority, we sell the farm and use the proceeds to move him into a quality assisted living facility." "Wait," I said quietly. "You're going to declare Grandpa incompetent so you can sell his land against his will?" Everyone turned to look at me like I'd broken some unspoken rule. "Not incompetent," Uncle Richard said carefully. He was a lawyer, after all. "Just in need of assistance with major financial decisions. It's for his own good." "Does Grandpa know you're doing this?" I asked. "Your grandfather is stuck in the past," Aunt Patricia said dismissively. "He doesn't understand modern financial planning. We're his children. We know what's best. This is what responsible families do," Dad added. "We plan ahead. We make hard decisions. Hard decisions," I repeated softly. "Yes," Dad said with an edge in his voice. "The farm will be sold. The money will be distributed appropriately. Everyone benefits." Olivia leaned forward, her expression dripping with false sympathy. "I know you've helped Grandpa with some basic farm stuff, Emma. We appreciate that. Maybe we can give you a little extra from the sale, like a property management fee or something." "How generous," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "It's decided," Uncle Richard said firmly. "I'll file the conservatorship petition on Monday. Brandon has already identified 3 potential buyers. We should have this wrapped up within 90 days. I looked around the room. At my father, who called me maybe 5 times a year. At my uncle, who'd never once thanked me for the years of farm work. At my aunt, who thought cattle ranching was beneath her now that she lived in Houston. At my sister, who'd visited Grandpa maybe 15 times in the past 5 years. At my cousins, already mentally spending their inheritance. Not one of them had asked about Grandpa's wishes. Not one had considered who'd actually been doing the work. Not one had even pretended to include me in the discussion. I pulled out my phone and smiled. "Has anyone checked the Payne County property records since 2019? I asked quietly. The room went silent. Confused faces turned toward me. "What?" Uncle Richard said sharply. I didn't repeat myself. I just sent a text to Margaret. Now. 30 seconds later, there was a knock on the conference room door. Uncle Richard stood up, annoyed. "We're in a private meeting." I walked to the door and opened it myself. Margaret Chen stood there in a perfectly tailored suit, carrying a leather briefcase that looked expensive and serious. "Good afternoon," she said pleasantly. "I'm Margaret Chen, attorney for the Hartley Family Land Trust. I understand there's been some discussion about selling property?" I stepped aside. She walked past me into the conference room where my family sat frozen in various states of confusion and growing apprehension. Margaret set her briefcase on the table and opened it with a precise click. "Thank you for this meeting," she said. "I believe there may be some significant misunderstandings about the ownership and control of the property in question." "Who the hell are you?" Uncle Richard demanded. "As I said, I'm the attorney for the Hartley Family Land Trust. I've worked with Samuel Hartley for over 30 years on various legal matters, including the establishment of an irrevocable trust in March of 2019. She pulled out a thick folder and opened it. In March 2019, Mr. Samuel Hartley executed an irrevocable trust, transferring the entire 240-acre farm property to his granddaughter, Emma Hartley. The trust executed immediately, meaning ownership transferred at that time, not upon Mr. Hartley's death. The silence was absolute, then explosive. "That's impossible!" Brandon shouted, jumping to his feet. "That property belongs to the family." "The property belongs," Margaret said calmly, "to the Hartley Family Land Trust, administered by and for the sole benefit of Emma Hartley." She began laying documents on the conference table like a dealer laying out cards. "Here is the property deed, showing transfer from Samuel Hartley to the Hartley Family Land Trust, dated March 18, 2019, properly notarized, witnessed, and filed with the Payne County Recorder's Office." Document after document hit the table. Official county seals, notary stamps, transfer dates. "That can't be legal," Olivia shrieked. "He can't just give away everything without telling us." "He absolutely can," Margaret said. And did. An irrevocable trust is a legal instrument specifically designed for this purpose. Mr. Hartley had every right to dispose of his property as he saw fit. He was probably senile, Aunt Patricia spat. Emma manipulated a confused old man. Margaret's expression turned icy. Mr. Hartley was evaluated by 2 independent physicians prior to executing the trust. Both certified him as mentally competent and fully capable of understanding his decisions. Any claim of undue influence or diminished capacity would fail immediately in court. She pulled out more documents. Furthermore, here are 4 years of farm management records. Tax returns showing Emma Hartley paying all property taxes, insurance policies in the trust's name, cattle sale receipts, maintenance logs, improvement documentation. The evidence kept piling up. Undeniable. Overwhelming. Emma has been the legal owner and active manager of this property for over 4 years, Margaret continued. She's paid $43,000 in property taxes. She's invested approximately $67,000 in improvements and upgrades. She's managed the cattle operation, coordinated repairs, and maintained the property to a higher standard than it's been maintained in decades. Dad's face had gone from red to white. 4 years? You've owned the farm for 4 years and never said anything? Grandpa asked me not to, I said quietly. It was the first time I'd spoken since Margaret arrived. He wanted to see how the family would treat me when they thought I was getting nothing. "Well, now we know!" Olivia screamed, standing so violently she knocked over her water bottle. "You're a sneaky, manipulative liar who stole our inheritance." "I didn't steal anything," I said, my voice still calm but with steel underneath. "Grandpa gave me something I'd actually earned through years of work. Something none of you even noticed I was doing." "Work?" Brandon laughed bitterly. "You fed some cows and fixed some fences. That's not worth millions." He stopped. Everyone stopped. Because he'd said it. Millions. The room went dead silent. "What did you just say?" Uncle Richard asked slowly. I looked at Margaret. She nodded slightly. It was time. "I suppose we should discuss the mineral rights as well," I said. I pulled out my own folder, the one Margaret didn't know about, the one I'd been preparing for this exact moment. In 1972, Grandpa sold the subsurface mineral rights to the farm for a 50-year term with a reversion clause, I said, opening the folder. In March 2022, those rights reverted back to the landowner, which, as of 2019, was me. I slid a document across the table. This is the mineral rights lease I signed with Continental Resources in May 2022. $22,000 per acre signing bonus, $5.28 million total. The room erupted in chaos. Shouting, disbelief, chairs scraping back. "This is the production report from the first well," I continued, sliding another document. "Came online in August 2022. Monthly royalties averaging $168,000. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I turned it so they could all see the screen. The checking account that showed a balance of $647,382.14. Since August 2022, I've received approximately $1.5 million in royalty payments, I said calmly. Based on current production and estimated reserves, I'll receive between $80,000 and $150,000 every month for the next 20 to 30 years. Dead silence. The kind of silence that feels like pressure in your ears. You've been a millionaire for over a year?" Olivia whispered. "And you never said anything?" "Why would I asked. "So you could treat me differently? Suddenly want to spend time with me? Pretend you cared about me instead of just the money?" Dad found his voice. "How could you do this to your own family?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but sadness. "You did this to yourselves," I said. "You assumed. You planned. You were going to declare Grandpa incompetent and sell his land against his will. You excluded me from discussions about a property I'd been managing for years. You treated Grandpa like he was already dead, and me like I was invisible. We're family," Aunt Patricia shouted. "Family," I said quietly. "Shows up. Family does the work. Family cares about people, not just their assets. You failed at all of that." Margaret began packing up her documents. "If anyone has questions about the trust structure or wishes to contest it, which I strongly advise against as it will cost you significant legal fees and result in certain failure, you can contact my office during business hours." Uncle Richard finally found his lawyer voice. "This isn't over. We'll challenge the trust. We'll sue for our rightful share." "Your rightful share of what?" I interrupted. "Property that hasn't belonged to Grandpa for 4 years? Mineral rights that reverted to me, not to him? Good luck finding a lawyer who'll take that case." I stood up and picked up my purse. At the door, I turned back one last time. "Grandpa wanted me to tell you something," I said. He said, "I gave my land to the granddaughter who earned it. If the others wanted it, they should have been there." And then I left. Margaret walked beside me to the parking garage. Behind me, I heard shouting, crying, chaos. In front of me, I saw freedom. I drove straight to Grandpa's farm. He was waiting on the porch, sitting in his weathered rocking chair, a slight smile on his weathered face. "They know," I said, sitting down in the chair beside him. "Good," Grandpa said firmly. "It's time they learned the world doesn't revolve around them." We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun lower over land that was mine, land that would be mine forever. "Your father called," Grandpa said finally, screaming, crying, begging me to undo the trust. My stomach clenched. "What did you say?" "I told him the trust is irrevocable. I told him I made my choice 4 years ago and I'd make it again today. I told him if he wanted a relationship with me going forward, he'd better learn to respect my decisions and treat you with the respect you've earned." He reached over and patted my hand. "You're the only one who saw me as a person, Emma. Not a bank account. Not a retirement plan. A person. That's worth more than 240 acres and all the oil underneath it." Over the next weeks, the family implosion was spectacular and complete. Uncle Richard did consult with several attorneys about contesting the trust. Each one told him the same thing. The trust was ironclad, executed when Grandpa was demonstrably competent, filed properly, and now over 4 years old. Any challenge would cost 6 figures in legal fees and fail. Olivia stopped speaking to me entirely. She blocked me on all social media and told her children I was a bad influence. The irony of being called a bad influence by someone drowning in debt wasn't lost on me. Dad tried guilt. Long voicemails about how disappointed he was, how I'd destroyed the family. How could I be so selfish? I didn't respond. Aunt Patricia sent a cease and desist letter demanding I share the mineral rights revenue. Margaret responded with a legal brief explaining exactly why that was absurd. Brandon was the most interesting case. He'd been telling people for years about his family's farm and his grandfather's land. After word got out about the mineral rights, several of his clients asked why he hadn't mentioned the family's oil wealth. He lost 3 major clients who felt he'd been dishonest about his background. What I did do was continue the work. I kept running the farm with the same care I'd always given it. The cattle operation stayed profitable. The land stayed healthy. I used some of the mineral rights money to buy an adjoining 80 acres that came up for sale, expanding the property to 320 acres. I quit my job at the veterinary clinic. Not because I didn't love the animals, but because I started my own large animal veterinary practice focused on ranch and farm animals, something the community desperately needed. And I started the Samuel Hartley Agricultural Scholarship Fund, providing full-ride scholarships to Oklahoma students pursuing degrees in agricultural sciences, veterinary medicine, or petroleum land management. Grandpa would have approved. 18 months after the confrontation, Grandpa passed away peacefully in his sleep at the farmhouse. I found him in the morning when I came by with breakfast. I sat with him for an hour before calling anyone, saying goodbye, thanking him for seeing me when no one else did. At his funeral, the family was civil but cold. We got through it with gritted teeth and forced politeness. But at the cemetery, after everyone else had left, my youngest cousin Rachel approached me. She was 19, Aunt Carol's daughter. "I just want you to know," she said quietly. "I think Grandpa made the right choice." I looked at her in surprise. "I saw how you were with him," Rachel continued. "Every weekend, every holiday. You actually spent time with him. The rest of us just showed up for the photos. We talked for a long time at the cemetery. About family, about expectations, about building your own life, separate from what everyone else thinks you should do. Can I come work at the farm this summer?" Rachel asked. "Learn about land management, about cattle, about what you do?" "Absolutely," I said, and meant it. 2 years after Grandpa's death, I stood in the office of my veterinary practice. The old farm now had a modern clinic building, a state-of-the-art barn, and updated equipment. The original 320 acres was now worth approximately $8 million in land value alone. Monthly mineral rights royalties averaged $183,000. The cattle operation generated an additional $6,000 per month profit. Annual income, approximately $2.3 million. Rachel had become my full-time farm manager. She'd switched her major to agricultural business at Oklahoma State and was learning everything about running the operation. She was smart, dedicated, and reminded me of myself at that age. The rest of the family had mostly moved on. We were civil at unavoidable family events. Weddings, funerals. The warmth was gone. That was okay. I built my own family from people who valued loyalty and work over entitlement and noise. Dad reached out once, about a year after Grandpa died. He wanted to talk about reconciliation. We met for coffee in Stillwater. He spent 20 minutes explaining how difficult things had been, how the family had been torn apart, how maybe it was time to move forward. What would moving forward look like? I asked. Well, he said carefully, maybe you could consider helping out your sister financially. She's struggling with debt, and it would be the generous thing to do. You certainly have enough. I stood up. This conversation is over. Emma, please. Do you know what Grandpa told me the day before he died? I asked. He said, "Don't let them make you feel guilty for being rewarded for loyalty. You earned this." I put money on the table for my coffee. I did earn it. Through 4 years of every weekend farm work that none of you noticed. Through actually caring about Grandpa as a person, not an ATM. Through showing up when no one else did. I picked up my purse. When you're ready to have a real conversation, one that starts with apologizing for how you treated me and Grandpa for decades, call me. Until then, we have nothing to discuss. I walked away. He didn't call. Last month, I closed on an additional 160 acres adjacent to the farm. Beautiful prairie land with good water access and excellent grazing. It needed work, but it had great bones, just like Grandpa would have chosen. As I stood on that land planning improvements, I thought about that conference room 2 years ago, about Margaret pulling out those documents, about the moment everyone's faces went from smug certainty to shocked disbelief. I didn't regret it, not for a second, because Grandpa had taught me the most important lesson. Some people deserve your loyalty, your time, your presence. They earn it through how they treat you, not through biological accident or social expectation. And some people don't. Knowing the difference and having the courage to honor it, that was the real inheritance. The $8 million in land value and the $2.3 million annual income was just the proof.